The Alola region, home to beautiful landscapes, blue skies, and as always, a handful of not so great Pokemon. So just like the previous 6 regions, I'm going to break down who the 10 worst Pokemon are to use in your average Alola region playthrough. And since Alola has a relatively small new roster of Pokemon, I decided that I will be including the regional variants as part of this list as well. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and here are Alola's worst Pokemon. Number 10, Wishiwashi. Placing Wishiwashi on this list was tough because, well, Wishiwashi is just kinda wishy-washy. In its solo form, it is the weakest of all Pokemon stat-wise, but in its school form, which it unlocks at level 20, it is one of the strongest non-legendary Pokemon in the game. It has incredibly high stats in everything except HP and speed, which means Wishiwashi gets worn down a lot easier than you'd think, especially in double battles and totem Pokemon battles where you're getting attacked more than once a turn. In situations like that, you'll probably be seeing solo Wishiwashi more than you'd like, and at that point, you're probably just dead. It's kinda like Alola's version of Archeops, but as good as Wishiwashi's school form stats are, it does have another Achilles heel to worry about, its move pool. Aside from Bulldoze, which you can buy as a TM around the midpoint of the game, Wishiwashi is stuck exclusively attacking with Brine and Feint Attack for most of the adventure. All the TMs that it really wants, like Earthquake and Ice Beam, are found at the very end. And since Alola has no shortage of good water types with infinitely better coverage, it makes it hard to justify using Wishiwashi for most of the game. It's fun in the beginning when you're able to steamroll most of your opponents, even with its relatively weak moves, but by the time you make it to Ula Ula Island, Wishiwashi's routine becomes just a bit grating and inconvenient. It still holds a lot of potential, which is why I decided to lead off with it though. I bet everybody's Wishiwashi experience is just a little bit different, so it's hard to say that it's worse than 10th. Number 9, Drampa. Drampa is the only Alola region Pokemon that I would say suffers from what I would like to call Johto syndrome. That being, it's just non-existent until the end of the game. Being the moon counterpart to Turtonator, it just feels incredibly unfair that Turtonator gets to enjoy being found relatively early on Ula Ula Island, while Drampa can't be found until Mount Lanakila just before the Pokemon League. And Ultra Sun and Moon could have fixed this. They actually allow you to enter the base of Mount Lanakila as soon as you get to Tapu Village, which would have put Drampa around the same location as Turtonator. But for some reason, Drampa still exists exclusively on the peak of the mountain. Now, when you get one, it's not horrendous by any means. It has a fantastic 135 special attack and a rainbow of moves you can teach it, which makes it a great last-minute Pokemon to add to your team if you're Nuzlocking, but it just sucks that it misses out on so much of the game. I don't get why they made this decision. It wouldn't be broken or anything, his low speed keeps his crazy special attack in check. Honestly, you could argue that Wishiwashi is more unbalanced than this guy is. But as it remains, Drampa is tragically one of Alola's least usable Pokemon. Number 8, Shiinotic. In addition to being absolutely terrifying and showing up in your nightmares, Shiinotic is also dragging your team down with it. While being a Grass Fairy type does give this Pokemon a pretty favorable matchup against most notable trainers, including Olivia, Nanu, and Hapu, Shiinotic's biggest weakness is that it doesn't get any of its best moves, including Giga Drain, Spore, or Moonblast, until after level 30. So for quite a while, it's not doing much. Aside from Sludge Bomb, it also doesn't really get a lot of coverage outside of its 2 main stab moves either. Thankfully, Shiinotic does evolve pretty fast at level 24, so you don't have to suffer through Moorlull for long. However, one aspect that does not improve upon evolving is its speed, as it remains one of the slowest Pokemon in the Alola region, and believe me when I say that is a low, low bar. Its relatively low HP stat also means that, like Wishiwashi, this Pokemon is not nearly as tanky as you might expect, meaning Shiinotic gets worn down incredibly easy in battles, which is not good for a Pokemon whose moveset is built around winning long, drawn-out fights. Number 7, Comfey. Continuing the trend of great Pokemon who were surprisingly bad in their home region, Comfey is another weird case of a Pokemon. Comfey boasts amazing stats, especially for how early in the game you can catch it. And as a pure fairy type, there's not much it ever has to be worried about. The main issue is just its move pool. It really can't do significant damage for most of the game, as Draining Kiss will be its best move until you're finally able to pick up a Dazzling Gleam TM in Vast Pony Canyon. So for a Pokemon that doesn't evolve, Comfey's graph of usability kinda looks like a reverse bell curve. It'll be great when you catch it, terrible for most of the game, and then suddenly kinda good again at the end. But there is a massive asterisk I have to put on this. See, Comfey in Gen 7 learns Draining Kiss at level 7. But in Lush Jungle, it spawns at levels 18 through 21. And if you happen to catch it at level 19 or higher, then Sweet Kiss will boot Draining Kiss from its moveset. So you actively have to look for the lowest leveled Comfey if you actually want to do damage. Ironic, isn't it? Of course, this is because Alola's move reminder is placed on the top of Mount freaking Lanakila of all places. Literally at the Pokemon League. That being said, Comfey does at least get Petal Blizzard in its 20s, and in doubles it can be a phenomenal supporting Pokemon with Triage boosting the priority of Floral Healing. So if you're doing a hardcore Nuzlocke with no healing items, this Pokemon can get you out of some really sketchy situations. But it doesn't change the fact that for most of the game, Comfey is not as good as it really should be. Number 6, Alolan Sandslash. Unfortunately, most Alolan forms were not the spectacular upgrades that a ton of people were imagining they would be. Well, unless you're Alolan Ninetales, which just kinda rubs salt in the wound of Sandslash, who is Ninetales' version counterpart in these games. The first issue is that it's found a lot later in the game than it should be, an unfortunate consequence of its typing. Naturally, Alola being a tropical region means that there are very few areas that can feasibly contain ice types, so Alolan Sandshrew isn't obtainable until you reach the Tapu village in the later half of the third island. Even though Sandshrew has almost always been an early game Pokemon, the Ultra Games had a chance to fix this as they reworked Seaward Cave and the first island into a home for ice types, but oddly, Alolan Sandshrew still doesn't appear there. So from the moment you catch it, you pretty much know that you won't be able to use it until it evolves. Its stats are just not built for that point in the game. Fortunately, you don't have to go far until you get the Ice Stone in Po Town, but even after evolving, you'll quickly realize that there wasn't much of an upgrade. Alolan Sandslash just has terrible synergy between its stats and its typing. Ice and Steel go together like oil and water. Most of the time they're just compiling their common weaknesses on top of each other. And of course, instead of making this guy a fast sweeper like the OG Sandslash, this one is slow and defensive. In competitive context, Alolan Sandslash usually gets around this with its ability Slush Rush, but since it's a hidden ability, it's sadly stuck with Snow Cloak in the main story. A relatively lame ability that requires you to add Hail to your moveset to get any use out of it. That alone should tell you a lot. The only trial on paper that Alolan Sandslash will help you with is the Dragon Trial, but of course that's headed by a Totem Komuo who is taking Alolan Sandslash to the dumpster with its very first fighting move. Same goes for Kahili in the Pokemon League. It can probably defeat a few of her Pokemon pretty easily, but she does use Bylay-style Oricorio in both pairs of games, and she gets a Hawlucha in the Ultra games, so Sandslash sadly remains limited even in its best battles. Hi, it's me again. Just wanted to say that if you're enjoying, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed. We still have 2 regions left to go, so don't miss out. Number 5, Crabominable. Okay, so to be honest, most of the problem with Crabominable is with its pre-evolution Crabrawler. Crabrawler is actually a very good early game Pokemon with favorable matchups against the first trial and Olivia's Grand Trial, and has a very solid move pool to back up its above average stats. But as you wait and wait and wait for it to evolve, its stats quickly become below average. While today Crabrawler just evolves with an Ice Stone like Alolan Sandshrew, in the Alola game specifically it has to go to Mount Lanakila, a recurring place of suffering in this region it seems. Which means in Sun and Moon, this Route 2 Pokemon isn't evolving until you catch the Box Art Legendary. This means you get Crabominable for a grand total of 6 trainer battles before the end credits roll. Who on earth signed off on this? Oh, probably the same guy who decided that the Move Tutor and Drampaw should be on the same mountain. Got it. All 3 of them are just chilling on this mountain, enjoying the fact that they're making this game just a little bit worse. Now thankfully, the Ultra games do fix Crabrawler, as well as its other unfortunate partner in crime, Chargebug, who now evolves at the Blush Mountain Power Plant. Crabrawler evolves shortly afterward, now that you're allowed to visit the very base of Mount Lanakila. However, while Vikavolt will soon become a useful Pokemon, Crabominable will not. All of its best matchups are already behind it by this point in the game, and the added Ice typing really doesn't help at this stage in the game. It's just adding extra weaknesses. This Pokemon is going to struggle against Guzma's newly revamped team in the Ultra games that includes Masquerain and Pinsir, both carrying super effective moves. It will lose to the Aether Foundation's higher-ups who have a tendency to lean more into Psychic-type Pokemon, loses to Komodo just like Sandslash did, it will lose against Mullane in the League, and also has a complicated relationship with Kahili. I think what makes Crabominable definitively worse than Alolan Sandslash is not just its horrendously late evolution in Sun and Moon, but also the fact that this Pokemon is surprisingly not that tanky. With Sandslash, you know that you at least have a reliable physical wall. With Crabominable, he's all attack with not much else. And with its typing leaving it weak to seemingly everything, this has to be one of the region's worst Nuzlocke Pokemon. Number 4, Lurantis. Unfortunately, Lurantis is just a strictly worse version of another pure grass type found in the exact same area, Serena. Comparing their stats head to head, Serena's are higher in every single category except for special attack, which Lurantis doesn't really use anyway since it pretty much only learns physical moves. They both have the same primary ability in Leaf Guard, which is bad, don't use it on either of these Pokemon. But Serena has a secondary ability in Queenly Majesty which blocks all priority moves, which is actually a fairly decent ability. Yes, Lurantis has Contrary, which works great with Superpower, but Contrary is a hidden ability so it can't be obtained during the main campaign, and Superpower is also Move Tutor exclusive in the Ultra games. It can't be taught at all in Sun and Moon. Serena also evolves at level 29, since that's when Steenie learned Stomp in Gen 7, and Lurantis evolves slightly later at level 34. That may not sound like a huge difference, but trust me, Fomantis' stats are terrible. Waiting until 34 means that it is missing out on its best battles in the game with Totem Wishiwashi and Olivia. That really drags this Pokemon's value down, because grass types in general will struggle a lot until fighting Hapu all the way at the end of Pony Island. And that is a long stretch to go. The only good aspects about Lurantis are that it learns Leaf Blade quite early at level 23 as a Fomantis, and it also gets Leech Life via TM pretty early. Aside from that, it's a pretty horrendously outclassed Pokemon. It really does not help that Serena is right there and is just strictly better. And even then, Serena is not great in Alola. I know I've been hyping it up a lot, but it's a borderline dishonorable mention at best. Number 3, Oranguru. Sorry to everybody who bought Pokemon Moon, this has probably been a painful video for you so far. But Oranguru is just not a Pokemon built for the main story. With its signature move Instruct, it's pretty clear that this guy was designed around VGC and double battles, of which there are painfully few during the main campaign. In addition to this, Oranguru is one of the very few new Psychic types introduced in the Alola region. Why is this such a bad thing? Well, many years ago I made my worst types in every region videos, and if you recall, if there's one thing worse than being a grass type in Johto, it's being a Psychic type in Alola. While Oranguru is thankfully found late enough to dodge its bad matchups against Totem Raticate, Araquanid, and Alolan Marowak, and is part normal type so the Ghost Trial isn't so scary to it, it still beats pretty much nobody in the entire game. Totem Vikavolt or Togedemaru, depending on which game you're playing, will both give it trouble. Obviously, Guzma and Team Skull are a big no-no. Nanu is completely wiping this guy out. Even Como summons a Caesar to deal with Psychic types, so that's no good. And of course, of all Fairy types, Rabombi becomes the last totem in the Ultra games. It is rough for Psychic types in Alola. Bruxish and Alolan Raichu can at least fall back on their good movesets and stats to skate by, but Oranguru catches no breaks. On that topic, Oranguru gets almost no coverage until the very end of the game, as all the TMs that it can learn like Thunderbolt, Energy Ball, and more are gated by the last ride Pokemon, Machamp. Which means for the wide majority of the game, Zen Headbutt is likely your only reliable move. Number 2, Alolan Raticate. It's just bad. Can I end it there? No? The people are invested in the video and want to see more? Okay, guess you're right. Anyway, Alolan Raticate really gains no benefit from being a Dark-type Pokemon. It pretty much just means that it's unusable against Hala and Totem Araquanid in the Ultra games, and then after level 20, its stats aren't even good anymore. Although, calling them good to begin with is giving this Pokemon way too much credit. Honestly, Cantonian Raticate would just straight up be better in this region, which is kinda funny. Yes, it has Hustle to make up for its low attack stat, but do you really want to be missing 20% of the time? This Pokemon is just unreliable in every single facet. Avoid it at all costs. As always, let's go to our dishonorable mentions. After the regional rodent won the last 2 regions, you probably expected Gumshoos to make this list. But I'm happy to report that Gumshoos is good for more than just a Donald Trump impression. Because that attack stat is huge, it's the biggest attack stat I've ever seen. And with Strong Jaw, this Pokemon is a better Dark type than Alolan Raticate, which is crazy because it's not even a Dark type. Yes, its low speed and defense is all but ensure that it will not survive an entire Nuzlocke, but it is a phenomenal early game Pokemon. Which is honestly better than just being mediocre across the board. Next is Togedemaru, who despite being a massive upgrade from Dedenne, is still a Pika clone at the end of the day. Electric Steel is a pretty great typing until you realize that it has to compete against Magnezone of all things, who is able to evolve into its final form in the same location where you first catch Togedemaru. On top of that, Togedemaru has virtually no coverage in Sun and Moon, with its lone Steel type move being Gyro Ball, which doesn't really fit this Pokemon well. Thankfully, move tutors in the Ultra games gave it access to Iron Head, and Zing Zap is a phenomenal special move. So if the option to catch the far superior Magnemite has passed you by, Togedemaru is not a horrendous alternative, at least in the Ultra games. And lastly, Cosmog and Cosmoem. No, you can't use them during the main story without trading, which is the only reason they're not on the list. but if they were, they would certainly be number 1, since they are literally the only Pokemon in existence with no attacking moves, effectively making them the worst Pokemon in existence. But since you can't even use them until post-game, they get spared from this video. And number 1, Pyukumuku. Pyukumuku is a pretty shameless reskin of Wobbuffet, but unlike Wobbuffet, it doesn't even have Shadow Tag to make it broken. And it completely messes up the gimmick of dealing damage through counters. For starters, it doesn't even learn Mirror Coat in Gen 7, just counter. So it can literally only do damage to physical attackers. They also completely distributed its stats wrong. Unlike Wobbuffet, who has astronomically high HP and low defenses so it can counter more efficiently, Pyukumuku has high defenses, but almost no HP. So it really doesn't counter for a lot of damage. This also messes up its signature ability Innards Out, which does damage to the opponent equal to how much HP Pyukumuku had before it was knocked out. Ignoring how bad that ability is for a Nuzlocke, this means Pyukumuku isn't even a good sacrifice Pokemon, as Innards Out is unlikely to one-shot anything attacking it, which means its actual most efficient way of dealing damage is by using Toxic, a move it learns criminally late at level 45 in Alola. Pyukumuku, in all honesty, is just one of those flavor Pokemon. I struggle to even call it a gimmick because the gimmick is just badly designed and doesn't even work. They just made it because, hey, wouldn't it be funny to have a sea cucumber Pokemon in the Hawaiian region? And you know what? It is pretty funny. I'm glad it exists. I'm just never going to use it, and you probably shouldn't either because it will fill your life with misery and woe. The Alola games are already slow enough without a Pyukumuku on your team. But that's gonna do it for this video. Be sure to like this video if you enjoy, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.